Good afternoon. Welcome to the tea table. I am so happy you have joined me today. Oh my, it's a gorgeous autumn September day, and we are going to have a very special tea talk, yes. Well, if you haven't gotten your tea yet, please pause and get your tea, and I'll be waiting for you. Well, we are listening to Mozart today. This is very special. Do you know a brand new piece of music that Mozart wrote was discovered in 2024? And this young group of young musicians in Germany is performing it, and you can go online and watch them. They're very young, and they're doing a good job. It's a beautiful piece. This is very unusual to have somebody find. This is a treasure. And so that is going to be our autumnal music. And I have a tea tray that is very special for you today. I'm going to arrange it so you can see the pot and the cups there. And it is Edinburgh Castle. And then there is a little salt shaker wearing the same plaid as the Edinburgh Castle plaid. And he is doing the shot put, which is a sport that came and originated in Scotland. You have to be so strong to do the shot put. Our son Gabriel won first in state for shot put, Washington State, in 2007, 4A school, and it was just so exciting. And we traveled over to see him. He threw in Eastern Washington in the Tri-Cities. Had to drive over at 4 in the morning on a Saturday. Gabe was with us. We drove together. You know, that was, for an athlete to do that. And then I just said, oh God, if he wins, I promise I give you all the glory forever. So I give God all the glory. This was such an achievement. Gabe is a great athlete, and he was a football player and champion player, and his team won first in college in their division 2 years in a row, Whitworth College. But Scotland is a land that I love. Scotland is a land that I know many of you love. And I thought for this time, and I brought all of you the most special treat, pumpkin bread. And I put it on a doily today on my silver dish to make it special. Help yourself. And then let's pour out. Pour a little cup of tea for you, and a little cup of tea for me. And you know me, I like my little splash of milk. I'll leave yours plain for you to make yours what you like. Oh my goodness, it's the most delicious, brisk, strong, black Scottish tea. And it is from Murchie's in Victoria, BC, and I keep it in this wonderful vintage tin of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip and the royal crown. And it is such a special, special tin. It was a biscuit tin, but it works perfect for tea. And in England, remember we learned on the Tea Talk, they called cookies, what we call cookies, they call biscuits. So I'm going to show you. I just thought that this looked so much alike. It's the nice squared off, and this is Edinburgh Castle. Beautiful Edinburgh Castle, and we talked about fabulous castle that sits over the hill in Edinburgh, and they have the Royal Mile. It goes from the Edinburgh Castle. You walk down, and the end of the mile is the Holyrood Palace. And between are all the little shops and St. Giles Cathedral. Well, I'm wearing a little plaid today. It's a cape, and it has interesting colors. It has this kind of, I'm wearing a British tan sweater with I just love wearing these brown amber, my amber stone. And I have a bouquet in an amber vase that has a bow carved in it. Do you see the little bow carved in kind of a tiger amber? And isn't that beautiful? All together, autumn leaves for you, my dear tea table people. And I have many tea table people in Africa. Yes, and this tea that we drink comes from England, but it didn't grow in England. Where did it grow? Kenya, in Africa. Yes, and it goes around the world and comes to my cup. Now, isn't that incredible? Yes, romantic indeed. In the olden days, it came by sea. I'm going to play this again. I think it's so special. I also have apples on the tea table. And these were the apples that dear Melanie brought me. They were on my porch, and I am going to turn these into an apple crisp this weekend. Yes, they came from her yard. I came home and there was a little bag with a darling note to Susan. Apples from the tree, happy September. Beautiful. What a gift. You know, you drive around and so many apple trees are forsaken, and the apples fall on the ground and no one even uses them. I'm trying to figure out how this shawl is kind of caught. There, and that's the way it goes. Okay, well, like I said, I have this amber on today, and with this kind of British tan sweater under, and that's what I was going to talk about. When I lived in England, all the men had British tan leather shoes. That was all the rage. And so I brought my purse, which is British tan leather. And this is my autumn purse. It's Italian leather, but it's that wonderful British tan and kind of a brushed brass handle as a strap. But I think the good leather, the smell of leather, the plaid, hot tea, apples, a nice fire. These are all of our autumn glories, aren't they? These are what make life so wonderful. And we share these with friends, don't we? Yes. For a piece of music to be found is quite unusual. I have not heard of it before in my lifetime. Perhaps there was maybe an obscure composer, but somebody as famous as Mozart or Beethoven, most of their music has been carefully taken care of. Now, I wanted to show you my little creamer. This is really old. I think it was from my grandmother, and it's the Canadian Mounties in the Rockies. And here, look at the canoe, and that has to be Lake Louise and the glacier. Isn't that beautiful? This is really old. I remember as a little girl, this was in my mother's china closet with a sugar bowl. Sadly, the sugar bowl broke in one of my moves. I have broken very little china, but at least we have the creamer. And that's all I needed today because I don't use sugar, so it worked out. But these lovely reminiscences that we have on our table. That, you know, when we go on a little trip or someone in the family gives us something and there they are on the table. And when you think about it, now, from now on, we are eating of the bounty. Here are the apples that took all the sun in the spring to grow. Here we have the pumpkin bread, and the pumpkin's just now coming. All the different pumpkin treats. And then we'll have the raspberry jam, the berry jam, the berries. These are all gifts from God and the season that come and sit on our table. Isn't that wonderful? Yes, we're so blessed. I wrote a poem once, and I've got to see if I can find it. My sister-in-law hopefully still has it. My husband and I and our youngest daughter Elizabeth went up to stay in a cabin my brother David had built. He built this beautiful cabin up at Lake Roosevelt, very remote. This is about 20 years ago. And I have never, ever felt such quiet. There was literally no noise. There was no noise. It was so quiet. And we walked in, and I just had this inspiration to write a poem. We had been driving all along the Columbia River, and when you go to Lake Roosevelt, that is the reservoir lake coming down from Canada. There's a place in Canada if you're driving in Canada up to this beautiful Banff and Lake Louise, it's called the Great Divide. And it's where all the water from the Rockies comes down and it divides. I think it's called Revelstoke. And to the west rolls the Columbia River. So that comes right from the Rockies. And then in Lake Roosevelt, they built that dam, and that lake is so beautiful. Well, it was so quiet, and we had driven coming ourselves there all along the Columbia. So vast. For people that don't live in Washington State, I live in Olympia. For me to get to Lake Roosevelt took at least 7 or 8 hours. Spokane is 6 hours, and then it's another 2 hours north. Well, and then if we go south of here to Oregon, we're going to go right along the end of the Columbia, which goes into the Pacific, Astoria, and all of Columbia is it's just, it's the most incredible river. Well, we walked in, and I got this flood of inspiration to write a poem. And my poem, I've got to get it, because poems are like songs. You can never write them again. But I know what I said in the poem. The theme was that this beautiful Columbia River that we were driving along had literally given us the electricity we were going to read our book by. It had given us, it waters, because irrigation, eastern Washington is flat and dry, and it takes a lot of irrigation to grow the fabulous wheat fields, the corn fields, all the fruit, the famous apples, the famous cherries, the famous peaches. So I was talking about our festive table in the Columbia River and how it had given us, and I've got to get that poem because I feel like it was one of the best poems I ever wrote, and it just flooded out of me. And then my husband, who does not write poems as often as I, however his poems are very good, he wrote a poem, and I don't know what it was about, but that cabin was so beautiful. It was all wood, hardwood floors. My brother David had put so much into it. It was just a divine experience being up there. And we were able to study and read and think and plan, and it was just everything we would have dreamed and hoped for in a little break. I think it was 2008, so not quite 20 years, I remember now. And do you know, I have to tell all of you again, where we live here in the Pacific Northwest is so much like beloved Scotland. It truly is. My husband and I were at the Lake Quinault Lodge about a month ago. Met a very nice man from Texas. You meet people there from all over the world. They come for the unusual rainforest. Well, he said to us, he said, last year my wife and I, we rented a car and we drove all through northwest Scotland. And it's a website you go on, and it's called The Secret Scotland or something, and they set you up because most people don't go up to northwest Scotland. It's more remote. It's away from Edinburgh and Aberdeen and all of the cities. And he said, you know, as we have driven around this beautiful peninsula for the last few days, which is the rainforest and the northwest of Washington, the tip, he said, it is just so much like Scotland. And I've always said that. The mist, the fog, the rain, the cozy, the fire, they have peat fires. But if you drive out on the coast, I've seen the peat. We don't use the peat, but in Scotland, they used it for everything. In Ireland, they used it for fire. They used it to make their roofs. Because when you get really far north, you don't have a lot of trees in the islands, at least in the Hebrides where I was visiting. And that was where I saw them using that, using the peat. And the peat fire is cozy. It's a special, I remember the peat fire in the Hebrides and the cedar fire in the Swiss chalets. Whoa, both equally beautiful. The smell of the cedar fire was divine. Oh my. This tea is very, very good today. Well, I just thought we have to just enjoy autumn. We have to just take time. Yesterday was a gray, rainy day, and I thought, oh, I'll do my first tea talk inside tomorrow. But out comes Mr. Sun and said, no, you're not going in yet. So I'm back outside. And I was actually kind of looking forward to being inside, but I thought, a day like today, I have to be outside. And I just know that you're all pulling your woolens out, and this is a woolen shawl that has the colors of the navy, and my hat is navy, and this is navy, and kind of this British, I would just call it kind of pumpkin British. I look at the pumpkin bread and look at how it kind of has the color tone. Kind of has a pumpkin color. I love that color of brown. I love all the browns, all the charcoals and beautiful plaids. Yes, each one is so special. Well, I hope that you are having a wonderful, wonderful autumn, because I am. And 2 days ago, which is interesting, for you who live in this area, you know, it was the glory of autumn. It was over the top. That was Tuesday. Then Wednesday was misty and gray and cold and rainy. Today, it's sunny, but not as warm as Tuesday. I think Tuesday was the last really, really hot day of autumn. I just felt it too. I felt this is the glory day for this fall. Well, are you reading books? Are you studying? I am. I've been reading some English poetry, and I've been reading, I always end up going to the biographies. I'm always interested in the people who wrote the poetry and the people who wrote the stories. I find it's the best way to learn history. Yes, it is. So beautiful. And Scottish history is so rich, so much to study and know, and how fierce they were. I will close with this. We were watching a documentary on the city of York, and actually York is one of my favorite places in all of England. It's north, it's just south of Scotland, and there's the famous York Roman wall that was built there. And Constantine was crowned there because he was in York. The Romans were ruling Britain at that time. Well, you know, York, I realized when I was watching, I've been to York. I knew I'd been there several times, and then I started analyzing. My first visit to York was to my dear friend Heather and her family, Mrs. White, and they took me all around to the York Minster, the biggest church in all of England. And it was Rick Steves' documentary, Travel of York. He did the city of York and the city of Bath, two great cities in England. And so I realized I was there in the winter, and I remember they had the after Christmas sales, and my friend Heather took me to a little shop, and I remember I bought a beret, and it was such a deal, one of the, after Christmas deals. So I bought a beret, and it was maroon, and it was huge. It was like a Rembrandt hat, and I had a navy blue coat, so it went perfect. Well, over the years, I lost that beret, and I felt so bad about it because I never had a hat that I liked better. It was just huge, kind of a maroon wool felt kind of fabric. And it just sat on the head so nicely, and I wore it a lot. And I just remember that. So I was in York in the winter, and then my next time in York was at Easter because her family invited me back. I met her Aunt Elizabeth, and her Aunt Elizabeth had connections with a historical library in London, and that's how I got my job in London. So I was in London working and studying, and then I came back and visited them at Easter, and that was really special. And they asked me to sing, and they were very involved in the little, it's not little, but next to the Minster, anything's little, the smaller Anglican church called St. Michael's of the Belfry. David Watson was the minister, and they were having quite a move with the young people, and they wanted me to sing for the Good Friday service, so I did. And then on the day of Good Friday, it was so special, all of the Christians from every church, there was Anglican, Catholic, Baptist, Protestant, the Free Scottish, Presbyterian, and they even had the Salvation Army. They all marched around the Minster singing together, showing unity for Easter. Wasn't that beautiful? So I was there then in the spring. So then I started thinking, okay, the next time I was there when I was traveling and singing with Shekinah, Mervyn Merla Watson, and the group of us that toured Europe. We ended up singing in the Minster, in the big York Cathedral there. So I was there in the summer. Well, then I thought, I was there one more time. Aha! I thought I was there in autumn. And that was the most beautiful. If you ever have watched, All Creatures Great and Small, that beautiful program on, on which they've done a redo. They had one in the 70s, and then they've now done this fabulous one. That's Yorkshire country. That is what York surrounds York, the town of York. Beautiful. Well, there's also a town there called Haworth, and that's the town where not Jane Austen, I'm sorry, the Bronte sisters, Charlotte Bronte and her sisters, and there's three of the writers that wrote the beautiful books of Wuthering Heights, and Elizabeth Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, And then they had a younger brother, and there were actually more children in the family that didn't make it, because in those days there was so much infant mortality. And their father was a minister, and so they lived in a manse in Haworth. Now, Haworth is a little town near York. So I was there in the fall with my sister, my beloved sister Nancy, and we went and visited that beautiful little town of Haworth. And I remember we both had red plaid on, or she had a red plaid coat, I had a beret. We were all dressed in Scottish, British woolens, because it was very cold. It was October then. And we walked by the moors where the wind wisps, and we went into the parsonage, which is the museum. You can still go there. I looked it up, it's still going, and it's all set up the way their life was. And when you think about the Bronte sisters, many people believe their books are, well, they are truly some of the greatest literature from England. And some people even credit them as the greatest in certain level. And they wrote so young. Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, and probably many of you have seen the movies, but the books are even richer. And so I was there in the autumn, and we walked through in that town. I have pictures. The autumn leaves were blowing, and it was windy, but it was bright, and sunny that day, but it was cold. And so I realized when I was watching this documentary, I've been to York 4 times in all 4 seasons. It was beautiful in the spring, beautiful in the summer, beautiful in the winter, but the autumn, oh my, the autumn. And then I remember walking with my dear friend Heather was studying history, and so she was reading all and studying, and I was with her mother during the visit. And Mrs. White would take me with her. She was considered a lay minister in the Anglican Church, so she did visitation and to the elderly, and I went with her and got in these unique situations and homes and met beautiful people. And then she took me for tea. And in York, the oldest part where the buildings almost meet and you walk, it's called the Shambles. There's a tea room, and it's still there. And you go up the stairs, and I remember that's when I fell in love with tea. We had hot, brisk tea in a pot. Oh yes, the lady brought it. And we had a raisin bun, which is like a puffy, just a sweet bun, but not too sweet, with raisins. Perfect for afternoon. That's what we had. And I thought York is, if you ever go to Great Britain, that is one place everyone should visit. There's a statue of Constantine right outside the York Minster, and that cathedral is beyond anything. It's called, they have a name for the glass. There is so much stained glass in the cathedral. I think they called it the Castle of Glass. It's just beyond. And then the Roman wall is there. And the reason they had the Roman wall was because of the Scottish people, the Scottish men. They knew guerrilla warfare, and they could not subdue them. The Romans could not subdue the Scottish. So what did they do? They built a wall to keep them away. Now, isn't that interesting? The Scottish still have their clans, still have their tribes, still have their plaids. And anyone that's even a little Scottish knows their clan. Yes, they do. I know mine. Mine is Hendry, that relates to MacNaughton, that the symbol is, it's silver, it's a high tower, and it says, I hope in God. I love my Scottish crest. It's very special to me. Well, I hope you're having a good day, and I hope you're having a good week, and you will have a good weekend. enjoy this last glory of September, because now we will enter the glory where we have all the leaves. These are my favorite leaves, these red and yellow leaves. My road is full of maples, and when I drive home from town, I drive through heavenly maple trees. Yes, they're so beautiful. Make sure you really drink in autumn. It's the most gorgeous time. My mother always said, God takes his paintbrush out. And I say, isn't God opulent? He paints the sky and then it's gone. Paints the trees for a season. Everything has a season. Don't miss this one. Okay. Well, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Please push the notification. Please share with someone. I love your comments. I appreciate them very much. And if you liked it, then a little like is nice. Thank you so much. Have a fabulous week. I look forward to seeing you next time.